So this is 1.2.1 kind of practice problems. They're not overly difficult, I hope. So write down the equations first. So our first equation is going to be work equals force times distance and work is usually going to be measured in something called foot-pounds, force is going to be measured in pounds, distance is going to be measured in inches or feet. Next one is pressure equals force over area. Pressure is going to be measured in PSI. Does everybody know what PSI stands for? Pounds per square inch. Uh, 1.2.1. Alright, this next one, pressure absolute equals so it's the absolute pressure in something like a valve or pipe equals something called the gauge pressure. And that's AU. I spelled that wrong. The gauge pressure plus the atmospheric pressure. Alright. So when we talk about gauge pressure, that's if you put like a gauge on your like hydraulic syringes on your devices, what would it read? Does that kind of make sense? And to the absolute pressure, and it's that plus the atmospheric pressure. Make this simple. Alright, last equation. The horsepower due to flowing fluid, so the power due to like any flowing fluid is equal to, I'll write that as is equal to the rate it's flowing in gallons per minute times the pressure in PSI divided by 1714, which is just kind of like a constant, and GPM is gallons per minute. Alright, any questions on those equations? Tyler? You can abbreviate it more or less however you want. If you want to abbreviate it, something like F would be fine. Well, it's force. Lowercase f would work. Number 1. A hydraulic force, let's say 41-pound weight, a distance of 3.2 feet. What is the work done by the hydraulic force in foot-pounds? So we're looking for work, so we're going to say work equals force times distance. In this case, our force is 41 pounds, and our distance is 3.2 feet. And what do we get for the total work done? So we end up with 131 foot-pounds of work being done. Does that make sense to everybody? Any questions? Alright. The pressure in a hydraulic cylinder is 131 psi. What is the total force on a 28.5 inches squared section of the cylinder? So what equation are we going to use for this one? Yep, so pressure equals force over area. So our pressure is 131 psi equals our force divided by our area, which is 28.5 inches squared. So our force ends up equaling 131 psi times 28.5 inches squared. And what's our force end up equaling? And what's the unit on that going to be? So we've got pounds per inch squared times inches squared. So just pounds. So the inches cancel and we're left with pounds. Make sense, everybody? Any questions? Number 3. What is the horsepower of a hydraulic system that pumps 7.6 gallons per minute at a pressure of 1300 psi? So we're going to say horsepower equals the flow in gallons per minute, so 7.6 GPM times our pressure, which is 1300 psi, all over 1714. And what do we get for our horsepower? 5.76 horsepower. Questions on that one?
Is that the unit?
Yeah, HP is usually the abbreviation for horsepower. Pressure in a pipe is 153 psi and the gauge pressure in the pipe is 138. What is the atmospheric pressure? So that we're going to do pressure absolute equals pressure gauge plus pressure atmosphere. So our absolute pressure in this case is going to be 153. That equals the gauge pressure, which is 138, plus the atmospheric pressure, which is what we're looking for. Subtract 138 from 153. We get the atmospheric pressure is 15 psi. And when you find the atmospheric pressure, it should be always around 15 psi, because one atmosphere pressure is like 14.96 psi. So if you get something like 25,000 psi for atmospheric pressure, something probably has gone horribly wrong. Alright, any questions?